Ather Zia, you have a Kashmiri background. There are lots of reports of communications being cut off in parts of Kashmir, India-controlled parts of Kashmir. What's the situation, as far as you know, on the ground there?
The situation in Kashmir right now is fast unfolding as a humanitarian crisis. From the information blackout, the curfews that are pervading, that we are seeing for the past 11 days now. So that's one part of the equation, what India is doing right now. But the other part of the equation is just a small exemplar that you just saw between the two guests. This is the situation that Kashmiris are caught in. It's almost as if Kashmiris have no voice. India has always made us out to be the proxy war, or it's a bilateral dispute, and then it suddenly becomes a law and order situation. But that's not the case. When the Kashmir issue was taken to the United Nations Security Council by Jawaharlal Nehru, it was clear, categorically, the Kashmir question before it became an India-Pakistan question. So the question of autonomy, I think the world community also needs to know and also needs to ask the question, like, why autonomy in the first place? Why was this region autonomous? And why 370? And why are people protesting? Why are they caged if it's supposed to be for their development? So I think those are all pertinent questions that need to be asked. And right now, as Kashmir is caged, as people are on the ground facing a humanitarian crisis, communication blackouts, there are mass arrests going on, and in South Kashmir, there are reports trickling out that there are young boys who are being pulled out from their beds. So that's the situation in Kashmir right now, and that question needs to be asked by the global community, that these are people protesting, and these are people silent. And once this siege is lifted, we don't know what's going to happen. So I really urge the world community to think about the Kashmiri people as the foremost carriers of this tragedy. And they have been protesting for the last 77 years, even before India and Pakistan were two nations. They have been protesting since 1931 for a sovereign nation. And now this has been hijacked into a bilateral dispute. And then when India talks about it, it suddenly becomes a law and order situation, a domestic dispute. That's not the case.
Ather Zia, you mentioned earlier that you felt Kashmiris were caught in between these two powers. I think we're seeing evidence of that rhetorically right here. But on the ground, the changes that are due to take effect in October, essentially taking away the status that Kashmir has now, and essentially being morally direct rule from Delhi and New Delhi, and also the changes of property rights and people being able to buy property from outside Kashmir. What difference do you think that will make on the ground?
Well, I feel with the revocation of 370, which was merely symbolic now, because what it meant for the Kashmiris was that we had territorial sovereignty, that the right to franchise was theirs, that people could not come out from other parts of India to Kashmir, and then that territorial sovereignty was protected. Apart from that, I think India has legally, with different statutes since 1947, entered into Kashmir. 370 was a tunnel through which all the other laws, including India's fundamental rights, which has a special clause for detention, which has been used in Kashmir so long, and it's been used by different predetermined governments. And when we talk about electoral democracy in Kashmir, I, in my own work, call it the politics of democracy, because the very legal foundations of elections that are held in Kashmir, they have always been illicit. And United Nations had even at that time issued a notice to India that they could not be held because the dispute was still sub judice. So that's something that we need to consider, that the democracy in Kashmir is not democracy, it's politics of democracy. And India, from New Delhi, has always been planting predetermined governments, and those are the collaborators that Mr. Zaidi was talking about. And those are the ones who very recently told India that if you revocate Article 370, there's no one who inside Kashmir is going to hold the Indian tricolor.
What do you think the future sort of 6 months to a year looks like in Kashmir?
I think it's going to be very tough for Kashmiris, because once they come out of the siege, when the siege breaks down, there is going to be a huge number of protests. and Indian government forces are not known to be easy. They use fatal, indiscriminate force, and that's what we have seen the United Nations Human Rights Commission report in June 2018 that came out, which reported on this. But this is what I want to say. Kashmiris are looking towards United Nations, and that's what they have done in the last 33 years. Even when United Nations was sidelined by India, they have stood their ground. They have taken their memorandums, even if it was one person receiving that memorandum at the observer headquarters. And right now, the Kashmiris on Twitter are giving the slogan, because they know tomorrow the meeting is going to be held at the United Nations Security Council. China has taken the matter there, and then it's been followed up, and there is going to be some action. And the slogan that they're using is decolonize, demilitarize, self-determination for Kashmir with an option for independence. I know it's a tall order, but it's not hard to dream.